Cole Hartman had lived most of his life on the quiet plains, where wide grass fields stretched to the horizon and the wind carried the soft smell of old cedar. People in the nearby town knew him as a calm and dependable rancher, someone who rarely spoke loudly, rarely argued, and never looked for trouble. He owned a modest ranch with a red barn, a few horses, and land that he cared for like family. Life for him was simple, almost too simple. But he didn't complain. He worked with the sun, slept with the moon, and kept to himself. Every year, the small town hosted a cultural gathering where families from different communities visited to share food, music, and traditions. It was the kind of event that brought color to the slow life of the plains. Cole never took part in the celebrations. Crowds made him uneasy, and loud conversations tired him out. But this year the gathering was larger than usual because a group from a distant mountain community had arrived, carrying with them traditions few people in town had seen before. Among these visitors was Alina, a woman everyone started calling the Giant Bride. She wasn't a giant in an unnatural way. She was simply taller than most men in the town, and her presence made her easy to spot in any crowd. Her shoulders were broad, her posture straight, and she walked with a strength that drew attention. Her people described her height as a blessing, a sign of guardianship. And although people whispered about her size, she carried herself with a gentle warmth. Her smile was calm, her voice soft, her eyes carried a kind understanding. Alina was engaged to a man from her community, a carpenter named Rohan. Their families had brought symbolic gifts to complete a traditional ceremony. These gifts included beautifully carved boxes, woven blankets, and ceremonial tools, all placed near a large wooden structure built in the center of the field. The entire town admired the craftsmanship, the beam's supports, and decorative symbols looked strong and carefully designed. Cole had no intention of going near the celebration, but his horse Daisy needed a special salve from the general store. So he rode into town. The moment he reached the dusty road leading to the heart of the gathering, he heard a commotion, shouting mixed with the cracking of wood. People were running away from the wooden structure. The top of it began to tilt, groaning under its own weight. A large beam came loose and dropped toward the ground where a child stood, frozen by fear. Her mother screamed, reaching out but too far away. Cole didn't think. He simply reacted. He jumped off his horse and sprinted toward the falling beam. His boots kicked up dust as he ran. Just as the heavy wood came crashing down, he slid his hands underneath it and stopped it from slamming onto the girl. The impact was strong enough to shake his arms and send pain shooting up through his shoulders. But the beam didn't crush the child. Cole held it long enough for her mother to grab her and pull her to safety. People gasped. Some shouted in relief. Others rushed to help stabilize the broken structure. Cole lowered the beam to the ground and stepped back, brushing dust off his shirt. For him, it was just instinct, nothing heroic, nothing worth making noise about. He didn't like attention, so he simply nodded at the people who thanked him and walked toward Daisy, ready to continue his errand. But someone had been watching him closely. Alina stood near the broken structure, holding one of the ceremonial blankets. She had seen the beam fall, seen the danger, and seen the rancher who moved faster than anyone else. Her community valued courage, strength, and selfless acts. What Cole did wasn't just festet, was brave in a quiet, grounded way that impressed her deeply. She watched him with curious eyes as he tied his horse to a post and spoke calmly to the general store owner. She didn't approach him right away. She was engaged, after all, and she didn't want to cause misunderstandings. But she still felt a natural interest in the man who didn't brag, didn't shout, didn't even smile after helping save a life. Instead, he acted as though what he did was ordinary. That was uncommon in most people she had met later that day. The families rebuilt part of the wooden structure to prepare for the ceremony. Children played nearby. Music began to fill the air again. Cole rode by once more, planning to return home. Alina happened to be walking near the road, carrying a collection of wooden carvings in a woven basket. She noticed how carefully Cole guided his horse, how he kept his gaze low, avoiding attention from the crowd. As Cole passed, his hat tilted slightly under the evening sun, casting a sharp shadow across his face. Alina hesitated, holding her basket. She felt it would be rude not to acknowledge him after what he had done. So she stepped forward, raising her hand politely. "Excuse me," she called gently. Cole slowed his horse and looked over. His expression was calm as always, but his eyebrows lifted slightly in surprise when he saw her tall, imposing figure. "Thank you," she said. "You saved a child today. My people saw it. We will not forget it." Cole felt uncomfortable with praise. He shifted in his saddle. "Anyone would have done the same," he said quietly. "No," she replied in a steady tone. "Not anyone." He didn't know how to respond. Praise usually embarrassed him, but Elena's voice held no exaggeration or dramatic admiration. It was simple truth, spoken plainly, that made him soften a little. She studied him with thoughtful eyes. She noticed the dust on his boots, the wear on his gloves, the faint scratches on his arms, signs of a hard-working man. He noticed her sincerity, her strong presence, and the peaceful way she carried herself, despite her height drawing so much attention. But their moment didn't last long. Rohan, Alina's fiancé, approached quickly from behind, his face tight with concern. He placed a hand on her arm. "Double quotes, Alina, your family is asking for you," he said. Giving Cole a cautious glance, she nodded politely and stepped back. Cole tipped his hat. "Have a good evening," he said, and nudged Daisy forward. Alina watched him ride away. Her thoughts filled with quiet curiosity she couldn't explain. That night, as lanterns lit the town square and music echoed through the open plains, Cole sat alone at his ranch, working on repairing a fence. He wasn't thinking about the celebration or the people there, but a part of his mind replayed the brief moment when Alina stopped him. He remembered her voice, calm, respectful, strong. He didn't know why it stayed with him. At the same time, Alina sat with her family, polishing ceremonial tools. Her relatives talked about the upcoming event, about traditions and gifts, but she kept thinking about the rancher. She didn't understand why his simple bravery had settled so strongly in her thoughts. Maybe it was because he acted without hesitation. Maybe it was the quiet strength he carried. Or maybe it was because he didn't treat her like a spectacle, the way some people did. He looked at her like a person, nothing more, nothing less. Neither of them knew it yet, but the small moment they shared, along with the falling beam and the gathering storm brewing far in the distance, would pull their lives together in ways no one in town could have predicted. Cole lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, unaware that tomorrow would bring not just a ceremony, but a storm bigger than anything Alina had ever seen. One that would force him to choose whether to step forward again, stay out of something that didn't concern him, and Alina, drifting to sleep, didn't know that the quiet rancher she had thanked would soon become part of a story that would echo across both communities for years to come. The next morning began with a peaceful sky. Soft sunlight spread slowly across the plains, turning the grass golden and warm. The wind was gentle, carrying the smell of fresh earth and pine. Families in the town woke early to prepare for the big ceremony. They hung ribbons, arranged chairs, set up tables of food, and placed all the ceremonial gifts neatly near the rebuilt wooden structure. Laughter and music filled the air again, as if the trouble from yesterday had never happened, but not everything was as calm as it looked. Far beyond the mountains, clouds were gathering, thick, heavy, and dark. They rolled over the distant peaks like a sleeping giant turning in its bed. No one noticed them yet. The focus remained on the celebration, especially on Alina and her family, who spent the morning preparing the gifts that symbolized unity. Between two families, Alina wore a traditional woven dress with patterns that represented her people's history. Around her neck hung a handmade ornament carved from a single piece of mountain wood. She looked proud, but calm. The townspeople couldn't help but admire her. She stood taller than most of the men, and her presence carried a strength that felt both gentle and powerful. Children whispered about her height. Grown-ups stole respectful glances, and her own community admired her confidence. Her fiancé Rohan, however, had grown tense since yesterday. People had talked about the rancher who saved the child. Some mentioned how brave he was, others talked about his calmness. Rohan didn't like the attention the stranger received, especially when Alina had been the one to approach him last evening. Even though she had simply thanked Cole, Rohan found himself annoyed. He didn't say anything out loud, but small signs showed the frustration he carried. Alina, on the other hand, wasn't thinking about anything except the ceremony and the responsibilities she had toward her family. She helped arrange the gifts, guided children out of the way, and checked the decorations. She carried herself with quiet focus. But every now and then, her mind drifted to the moment she saw the rancher lift that heavy beam so easily. She wondered how someone so reserved could show such sudden courage. While the town prepared, Cole spent the morning fixing the roof on his barn. He wasn't planning to visit the celebration again, but something felt strange in the air. As he worked, he noticed a cool breeze coming from the mountains. He looked toward the horizon and spotted the dark clouds forming far away. At first he thought it was just normal weather. The plains often had sudden storms. But something about these clouds made him uneasy. They seemed too thick, moving too fast. He climbed down from the roof and wiped his hands on a cloth. The wind picked up, stronger than before. Daisy, his horse, raised her head nervously. Cole looked again toward the town, wondering if the people there noticed the change. Meanwhile, back at the gathering, the celebration started. Drums played a steady rhythm, families lined up, and elders prayed for unity. The rebuilt wooden structure stood tall, decorated with ribbons and carvings made by Elena's community. The symbolic gifts-woven blankets, carved wooden boxes, and tools made from stone were arranged carefully. Elena's family guided her toward the structure while Rohan stood proudly at her side. Everything seemed peaceful, almost perfect. Children ran around, chasing each other. Women laid out food on long tables. Men adjusted the ropes, holding up the tents. But suddenly, Alina heard something, a low, distant rumble. She paused. At first, she thought it was the sound of drums, but the rhythm was uneven, rolling like a deep growl across the sky. She turned toward the horizon. Her heart froze. A massive wall of dark clouds, taller than the mountains themselves, was sweeping toward the plains with unbelievable speed. It wasn't just a storm. It was the biggest and darkest thunderstorm she had ever seen in her life. Lightning flashed inside the clouds like white bones moving under a giant creature's skin. The wind pushed against her dress. She felt the pressure of the storm even from far away. She gasped. "This is the biggest I've ever seen," she whispered, her voice shaking slightly. Children stopped playing. Some adults noticed her staring and turned to look. Gasps spread through the crowd as the storm revealed itself fully. Rolling like a black ocean wave ready to crash, thunder cracked so loudly it made some young boys jump. A sudden gust of cold wind slammed across the field, lifting light items off the tables. Ribbons ripped from their posts. Decorations fluttered helplessly. People shouted in confusion, calling for children and gathering baskets. Someone yelled, "It's coming fast. We need to move." But nobody knew where to go. The nearest strong shelter was the town hall, but it was too far for the crowd to reach in time. The rebuilt wooden structure began to sway, creaking under the rising wind. The ceremonial gifts were in danger of being scattered across the plains or damaged by the storm. Alina looked desperately at her family. They tried to gather the gifts, but the wind was too strong. One of the carved wooden boxes tumbled across the ground. Another cracked open. People rushed but were blown back by sudden gusts. Rohan shouted orders, but his voice was weak against the rising noise. He pointed toward the tents. But everyone knew cloth tents would never survive a storm like that. And then, as panic grew louder, Alina saw movement from the far edge of the field. Cole. He was riding Daisy toward the gathering as fast as he could. His hat was pulled low, protecting his eyes from the wind. His coat whipped behind him. He pulled the reins sharply as he reached the edge of the celebration. And Daisy slowed with a sharp snort. Cole looked around, eyes sharp and clear. He saw the collapsing tents, the rolling carved boxes, the children clinging to their mothers, and the entire community frozen in fear. He hesitated, not because he was afraid, but because he was deciding something in that quick moment whether to step into a situation that didn't involve him. It wasn't his ceremony. It wasn't his community. He had no obligation to join the chaos. But then he saw the look in Elena's eyes. She was staring at the storm with worry, trying to protect the gifts her family worked hard to make. She was trying to steady the wooden structure, even as the wind shook it violently. Cole made his decision. He shouted, "Ah! Everyone, move the gifts and the children to my barn. Now." His voice was louder than anyone had ever heard from him. It cut through the noise like a sharp blade. People stared at him, stunned. "My barn can hold the wind." He shouted again. "It's the only solid shelter close enough. Move." The shock broke the crowd's frozen fear. People scrambled into action. Mothers picked up children. Men gathered carved boxes. Elders held blankets tightly to their chests. Elena didn't hesitate. She grabbed a large ceremonial trunk and lifted it easily onto her shoulder. When Cole saw her strength, he nodded, impressed. Without speaking, they fell into a rhythm. He carried heavy wooden beams and boxes, and she carried large woven bundles and blankets. Together, they guided people toward Cole's ranch, which was only a few minutes away. The wind roared behind them. The storm pushed closer, lightning flashing brighter and louder with every heartbeat. People ran in a long line across the field, carrying everything they could. The tents collapsed behind them, flapping helplessly. The wooden structure rattled dangerously, pieces falling off as the wind ripped at it. Cole stayed behind the group, making sure no one was left. Elena stayed close, helping anyone who slowed down. Even Rohan followed with the others, though his eyes showed discomfort seeing Elena move beside the rancher with such determination, just as the last families reached the barn. The storm hit the plains with full force. Thunder exploded. Winds slammed against the world like a giant's breath. Dust and leaves flew through the air, and the plains turned dark under the weight of the clouds. Cole yanked open the barn doors, shouting, "Everyone inside!" People stormed in, one after the other. Children cried. Elders prayed quietly. Horses inside the barn whinnied restlessly but calmed as Cole moved among them. Elena carried the final ceremonial box inside and set it gently on a haystack. She turned back toward the doors and saw Cole still outside, looking across the field to ensure no one had been left behind. The wind pushed against him so hard he had to lean forward to stay balanced. She shouted, "Come inside! The storm is here." Cole took one last look at the empty field, then turned and ran into the barn. He pushed the heavy doors shut with Elena's help. Together, they slid the wooden beam across the handles to lock them. The barn shook, but it didn't break. Rain slammed against the roof like 100 hands beating at once. But inside, the air was warm, safe, and dry. No one expected what the rancher had just done for them. They looked at him with gratitude and disbelief. Elena looked at him with something else, something deeper, something she didn't fully understand yet. The storm outside roared like a living creature, but inside that barn, their story was only beginning. Inside the rancher's barn, everything shook, but nothing broke. The thick wooden walls groaned against the force of the storm, yet they held strong, the way Cole had said they would. Families huddled in groups, whispering prayers, comforting children, and dusting rainwater off the ceremonial gifts they managed to save. Some men breathed heavily from running against the storm winds. Others simply sat quietly, grateful to be safe. Cole walked to each corner of the barn, checking the beams and roof. He made sure there were no weak spots, no gaps that could let the rain or wind through. Every few seconds, another loud clap of thunder made the barn tremble, but he remained calm.
8.
People watched him with both admiration and relief. His steady presence helped them feel safer, even as the world outside raged like a wild animal. Elena helped too. She guided children to sit on bundles of hay, helped elders settle comfortably, and reassured frightened families. Her height made her easy to spot, and her strong voice helped people feel grounded. Even in the dim lantern light, she seemed like a pillar, steady, dependable, someone others could lean on. Rohan sat near the center of the barn, holding a piece of cloth to shield his face from dust. He watched Alina move around, helping everyone she could. But something inside him twisted an uncomfortable feeling he didn't want to admit. He noticed how people listened to her, how they glanced at the rancher with gratitude, how Alina sometimes looked toward Cole with quiet respect. Thunder cracked again, making the barn shudder. A child began to cry. Alina rushed over and knelt beside the girl, placing her large hand gently on her shoulder. She whispered calm words until the child's sobs slowed. The mother thanked Alina with trembling hands. Alina gave a small smile and rose to her feet. Meanwhile, Cole grabbed a bucket of water from the storage area and brought it to the center of the barn. "Anyone thirsty?" he asked in his quiet voice. A few men nodded gratefully. Women helped their children drink from small wooden cups. Despite the raging storm outside, the barn was filled with tiny moments of kindness, people sharing snacks, passing blankets, offering warm looks to one another. Alina watched Cole move through the barn with steady steps. He didn't try to get attention. He didn't speak loudly. But every action he took was thoughtful. He checked the horses, tightened the door beam, and listened when people asked questions. His calmness spread like warmth through the room. Another loud rumble of thunder made the lantern flicker. Some people tensed, but Cole simply adjusted the wick so the flame steadied again. Alina noticed this too. Finally. Slightly, Cole walked toward the wide front doors to check the storm again. Strong wind pushed against the wood. The barn creaked, and the beam holding the door rattled. Alina quickly walked over to help him, pressing her hand against the door to keep it steady. "It's holding well," Cole said, raising his voice slightly to be heard over the wind. "It is," she replied. "Your barn is strong." He nodded. "Built it with my father. Thick walls, support beams from old cedar trees." She looked up at him with interest. "You and your father built all of this?" "Every piece," he said quietly. Thunder flashed, lighting their faces for a brief second. Alina took a breath. "Thank you for letting everyone stay here. You didn't have to do that." Cole glanced around the barn, where families were resting and talking softly. "They needed help, and my barn was close. But still," she insisted gently, "you stepped forward when many froze. You led everyone here." Cole shifted slightly, uncomfortable with the praise. "Anyone could have done that," "Oh," she said softly. "Not anyone." Their eyes met briefly. It wasn't romantic. It wasn't dramatic. It was simply a moment of two people recognizing something honest in each other. Before Cole could reply, a woman called Alina's name. She excused herself and walked back to the group she came with. Rohan watched the whole exchange from the back of the barn. His jaw tightened. He wanted to walk over and say something, maybe pull Alina aside, but he stopped himself. He didn't want to appear jealous or unreasonable. But the feeling lingered, sitting heavily on his chest like a stone. Hours passed. The storm didn't weaken. Rain fell so loudly that it sounded like a river crashing onto the roof. Lightning split the sky again and again, each flash bright enough to momentarily light up the whole barn. Families stayed close together, jumping at the loudest thunder strikes. Cole carefully moved a lantern away from the hay so nothing accidentally caught fire. Alina admired how careful he was with everything. Rohan felt the storm pressing on him, making him more restless. As the night deepened, the barn lights became the only warm glow in a dark world. Some children fell asleep on the hay wrapped in blankets. Few adults quietly hummed calming melodies at one point. The wind shook the barn so violently that a small stack of wooden planks near the back wall collapsed with a loud clatter. People gasped, thinking something had broken. Cole hurried over and checked the wall. Lena followed him, her footsteps quick but steady. Cole pushed the fallen planks aside and ran his hands along the wall boards. "Just the planks," he said. "Walls strong." Alina let out a breath of relief. "Good." Cole looked at her hands for a moment. Her fingers were rough from work, but steady. She noticed him looking. "You work hard," he said quietly. She smiled. "My people teach us to use our strength to help others. That's a good way to live." "And you?" she asked softly. He looked around the barn. "I learned to fix things, to make sure they don't break, to take care of animals, to make a place safe." "That is also strength," she said. Before they could say more, a loud crash shook the entire barn. Something large fell outside. People screamed. A child began to cry again. Alina and Cole ran to the door and listened. Through the noise of the storm, they heard trees cracking somewhere near the edge of the field. Lightning struck again, illuminating the world for a moment. They saw through a small gap in the wood that several branches had fallen near the fencing. Cole exhaled slowly. "I'll check outside when the storm calms." Lena glanced at him, shocked. "No, it is too dangerous." "I know," he said. "That's why I'll wait. Not now, later." She nodded, relieved. The storm continued to roar, but after a long while the thunder softened. The wind slowed to heavy breathing instead of angry shouting. The rain lost some of its force. Families inside the barn relaxed a little, though no one felt the night was safe yet. Cole walked around again, checking the beams. Alina followed quietly, offering her help where needed. Rohan watched them, his thoughts tangled with worry, pride, and irritation. After another hour passed, the worst of the storm had moved farther east. The barn still shook slightly, but the danger had lessened. People could finally hear their own voices again. Some families thanked Cole repeatedly. He only nodded, saying, "Just glad everyone's safe." One older man placed his hand on Cole's shoulder. "You saved more than just our gifts, son. You saved our people today." Cole didn't know how to respond. His cheeks turned slightly red. Alina stood nearby, hearing every word. She felt warmth fill her chest, a strong sense of respect for the quiet rancher who stood among them like a steady oak tree. Rohan stepped forward and tried to speak to Alina, but she was helping an elder woman adjust a blanket. He waited, growing more frustrated. Eventually, as the storm softened into gentle rain, Cole opened the barn door, just a little, enough to see the outside. Cool air rushed in. The field was soaked. Branches were scattered. But the worst had passed. People sighed with relief. Cole turned to everyone and said, "You can stay here until morning. It's warm, safe." Alina looked at him, grateful beyond words. Many others looked at him the same way. No one expected this much kindness from a man who lived such a quiet life, and none of them, not even Cole, realized that this night, this storm, and this shelter would change everything that came next. Morning arrived slowly, like the sky was waking up after a long night of fighting. Soft, pale light slipped through the cracks in the barn walls. The storm clouds were moving away, leaving behind a damp silence and the smell of fresh rain. Some families were already awake, stretching their tired arms, whispering quietly about how grateful they were to be safe. Others still slept on the hay, exhausted from fear and worry. Cole stepped outside first. His boots sank slightly into the wet earth. The fields were covered in broken branches, leaves, and puddles. The wooden ceremony structure was gone, shattered. Pieces of it lay scattered across the grass. Tents were torn, ropes snapped, and decorations lay tangled in the mud. Despite all this destruction, the sky looked peaceful now. Like the world was trying to apologize for the chaos it caused. Alina walked out next, wrapping a blanket around her shoulders. She paused in the doorway, taking in the sight of the ruined field. Her breath caught. This had been the place where her family wanted to complete a peaceful ceremony. Now it looked like a battlefield. But then she looked at Cole, who was already picking up fallen branches near the fence with steady movements. Something about his quiet determination calmed her heart. Rohan came out shortly after. His eyes scanned the mess with frustration. But his attention kept drifting to Alina, then to the rancher working alone in the mud. His jaw tightened as he watched Alina step forward to help Cole without hesitation. She said softly, "Let me help you." Cole shook his head. "You should rest." "It was a long night. I rested enough," she replied. "You did more than anyone." He didn't argue. He simply handed her a broken branch, and they started clearing the path together. They didn't talk much at first. The work was heavy, but the silence between them was comfortable, almost peaceful. Inside the barn, families began gathering their belongings. Some walked out to thank Cole in person. A mother hugged her child tightly and told Cole, "We owe you everything." An elder shook his hand and said, "You acted with a brave heart, son." Some men offered to help fix the fences or roof as repayment. Cole nodded politely to everyone, though praise still made him uncomfortable. He wasn't used to being at the center of attention. He simply wanted to make sure everyone got home safely. Elena's family came out in a small group. They carried their ceremonial gifts carefully, many of them wrapped in blankets to protect them from the wet ground. They approached Cole with respect. One of the older women bowed her head deeply and said, "You saved our work and our people. We will always remember this." Cole simply replied, "I'm glad I could help." But he noticed Elena watching him with quiet admiration. Her gaze felt warm, steady, grateful in a way that went beyond simple thanks. Rohan finally walked over, clearing his throat. His face looked tense, but he spoke politely in front of everyone. "We appreciate what you did," he said to Cole. "You helped our community." Cole nodded. "Anyone would have," he said calmly. That answer irritated Rohan, but he kept his frustration hidden. Then he turned toward Elena. "Elena, we should go. Our families need to discuss how to continue the ceremony." Elena nodded politely, but glanced at the damaged field again. "There is nothing left to prepare here," she said quietly. "The ceremony cannot happen today." Rohan frowned. "We will build it again. Must. It is tradition." She turned to him, her voice steady but gentle. "Tradition does not require us to risk people. The storm destroyed everything. Maybe we should wait." Her calm tone only made Rohan angrier inside. Though he tried to hide it, a quiet tension grew between them, one that their families sensed immediately. Later in the morning, Cole invited everyone inside the ranch house for warm bread, dried fruit, and hot tea. The families gathered around his long wooden table. Children sat on stools. Elders sat near the fireplace to warm their hands. And even the more serious men relaxed as they enjoyed the simple meal. Elena sat beside one of the older women, helping her drink tea. Her eyes kept drifting to the rancher as he quietly moved around the room, offering more food, fixing the fire, or helping lift heavy items. Each small action made her respect him more. Rohan watched Elena carefully. Every time he saw her look toward Cole, something twisted deeper inside him. He tried to join the conversations, tried to take Elena's attention, but she was focused on helping others and thanking Cole's people for their kindness. After breakfast, families began preparing to travel back to their temporary campsite. Some would return home later that day. Others planned to stay in town longer. The storm had changed everything. Their planned ceremony was no longer possible. Before leaving, the elders of Elena's community approached her privately. They wanted to speak about something important. Rohan tried to join the conversation, but one elder raised his hand. "We must speak with Elena alone." Rohan hesitated, then stepped back reluctantly. The elders guided Elena to the side of the field, where fallen branches lay in piles. They spoke with quiet voices so the others could not hear. One elder said, "A storm reveals truth, child. In your fiancé's eyes, we saw fear, pride, and worry for himself." Another added, "But in the rancher's actions, we saw courage, heart, and selflessness. He helped our people without expecting anything in return." Lena listened quietly, her heart pounding. A third elder said, "We saw how you looked at the rancher, and we saw how he looked at you with respect, not fear, not comparison." Lena felt her face warm. She lowered her gaze. "I thanked him because he saved lives. Nothing more." One elder smiled gently. "Perhaps, but your heart speaks louder than your words." Lena's thoughts grew tangled. She respected Rohan, but she had never felt deeply connected to him. She had agreed to the engagement because it was expected. But after last night's storm, something inside her had shifted. She kept remembering the rancher pushing the barn doors closed beside her. The way he checked on everyone, the way he carried those heavy boxes without hesitation. The elders continued, "We will not force any decision, but we believe you should choose a partner with a heart as strong as yours." Elena's breath grew unsteady. She had always been expected to follow tradition, to marry who the community approved, to live the life chosen for her. But now, for the first time, she felt the possibility of choosing for herself. When the elders left her to think, she stood quietly for several minutes, looking out at the open plains. The sky was clear now. The storm had washed away everything old and left the world new and open. Meanwhile, Cole walked across the field, picking up broken pieces of fencing. When he saw Elena standing alone, He paused. Something about her posture looked heavy, like she carried a burden too big for one person. He walked over slowly. "Everything okay?" he asked softly. She turned toward him, her eyes full of conflict and clarity at the same time. "I'm just thinking," she said. He nodded. It was a long night. It would make anyone think. She looked at him deeply. "You saved so many people with your courage, but you don't talk about it." Cole shrugged. "No point in talking about what needed to be done." Alina stepped closer, her voice gentle. "Many people do what is needed only when it is easy. You stepped forward when it was dangerous." He didn't know what to say. Compliments always made him uncomfortable. He looked away, scratching the back of his neck. Alina took a deep breath. "Cole, I can't return to my old path. Not after what happened. Not after seeing what truly matters." He looked confused. "What do you mean?" Before she could answer, voices called her name. Her family was waiting. She looked back at him one last time and said quietly, "You did something no one expected, not just saving us from the storm. You changed the way I see my life." Then she walked away, leaving Cole standing still, unsure what to think, unsure what her words meant. Later that day, when her family prepared to leave, Alina approached everyone and made an announcement that stunned her entire community. She said she could not. "Marry Rohan." Gasp spread through the group. Rohan stood frozen, shocked and upset. Her voice did not shake. "He is a good man, but my path is different. I must follow a life built on truth, not expectations." The elders nodded in understanding. They already knew the truth in her heart. Rohan didn't argue. He only lowered his head and walked away quietly. Elena's family accepted her choice. They believed storms revealed true character, and they had seen everything clearly. As they packed their belongings, Alina walked toward the ranch one last time. Cole stood by the fence, adjusting the reins on Daisy. When he saw her approaching, he straightened, unsure what to expect. She stopped in front of him, took a deep breath, and said, "My family is leaving. But I want to stay for a while. Not because of the storm. Not because of duty. But because I want to understand the truth that brought me here." Cole felt something strange in his chest. Something warm. Something he hadn't felt in a long time. He nodded slowly. "You can stay as long as you want," he said quietly. Alina smiled. A soft, peaceful smile. And in that moment, with the storm behind them and the open plains ahead, their new story began, one built not from tradition but from courage, choice, and the unexpected kindness of one quiet rancher who changed everything without ever trying to.